Welcome to our roundtable with ScreenCraft Fellowship winners. Let's just dive right in. So we've got Mark Stasenko here, Dante Russo, and Anna Klassen. Each of them are winners of 3 previous of the past year's ScreenCraft Screenwriting Fellowships. Mark, let's start with you. So tell us, what year did you win the fellowship, and tell us a little bit about what your fellowship week was like.
I won in 2015, and that feels like a long time ago now. It's kind of crazy. I won the fellowship in 2015. It was, I think I found out in February, and the week itself was in May, but it was a whirlwind of a week. You meet with producers, managers, agents, executives all week, and it kind of culminates at this awesome dinner. Ours was with Scott Neustadter and Jordan Horowitz, who was recently featured in the Oscars for La La Land. And who was the third person?
Michael Costigan.
Michael Costigan. It was an awesome,
Nice.
it was a really cool dinner where we learned a lot. But yeah, it was an amazing week.
What was your week like? Like, what are some of the meetings that you took? What came out of the week?
That's great. So the truth is, it was 3 years ago, and the specifics were really a whirlwind. But the highlight was meeting at 3 Arts. I met with a manager there who I ultimately signed with and I'm still with. And he's been a huge proponent of me and has totally made my writing better and has helped launch my career. So that was the most important thing of the fellowship week for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Dante, tell us a little bit about your experience, I guess, last year in 2016.
Yep. Yeah, I won the 2016 fellowship. And I think the best part for me was the dinner. It was very inspiring. Just hearing all these writers kind of at their peak of their career and just, leaving feeling like you had a little community. Writing is so isolating a lot of times. And so to be able to sit with the other fellowship winners who I still keep in touch with, who I still talk to, who are all doing awesome things as well. Just to create that, have that community, and then just to hear these stories and hear how, they were all like us at one point. And so, and it's so easy to forget that, you just see them holding their Oscar and you're like, oh, that's easy. And it's not. And so, and just having the opportunity to keep in touch with them as well, and be able to have a lifeline when you have a question or a problem, because the business can be so daunting and so scary, especially when you're alone writing,
Yeah.
So I think the community and that dinner was probably the best part for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Anna, what was your
Totally.
experience like this year?
Yeah, no, I mean, just sort of to piggyback off everything they said, one of the things that I found so helpful was taking all these meetings back to back and being able to practice my pitch over and over and over again. I think by the beginning I was like, at the start of it all, I was a little shaky. I didn't know what to say. By the end, I could say it in my sleep, and it was so helpful just to sort of get feedback on that. I mean, you guys gave me pointers also, but just sort of being able to hone in on a pitch and know what questions to expect, know sort of what areas to talk about was really, really helpful.
What were some of the meetings that you took, and what were some of the highlights of like what came out of them?
Yeah, so for me, as well as my fellow fellowship winners, we actually all had managers by the time that we did our meetings, which was amazing. Actually, because I won, I got a manager.
Awesome.
So that was fantastic. So we didn't meet with managers or agencies. We met more with like production companies and studios. We met at Fox. We met at Warner Brothers. And we met at the Combine, which is Jeremy Renner's production company with Don Hanfield. And I think that was probably my favorite meeting. They were just like so nice and just like really willing to hear everything that I had to say about my script. They asked to read several things. It was just like I think I was surprised by how open people were to listening to what you had to say and to reading your material. So I think that was amazing.
Mark, how do you think screenwriting competitions can help screenwriters launch their careers?
Yeah, so for me, it was a huge part of what. It's definitely a huge part of what got me signed. It's a huge part of kind of career momentum and getting eyes on my script. I think if you ask a bunch of writers how they kind of got their foot in the door, a lot of people have different stories. But for me, screenwriting contests were the way that worked for me. That year, I'd won. About a week before I won the ScreenCraft Fellowship, I found out I won Zoetrope, which was Francis Ford Coppola's competition with a different script. And it helped a lot during Fellowship Week to be like, oh yeah, also I have this whole different script that Francis Ford Coppola picked to win his competition. So that was, that was a helpful kind of, okay, let's at least read that one as well. And it's just beyond the winning, the kind of the deadlines and the motivation from being in the quarterfinals consistently to being in the semifinals to just kind of motivating your writing to get some sort of unbiased feedback on it was really helpful when I was starting out at writing.
I think deadlines, just to jump on that, is like probably the most important, I think, regarding all these competitions, because whether you win or not, you should still be writing. You shouldn't necessarily be writing just to win, And I think deadlines are so important, and I think that's my big takeaway, is the reason why I keep applying to all these competitions is it forces me to write, and it forces me to have a deadline, it forces me to finish things, forces me to pass it off to get feedback. Whereas if I didn't, I'd be working on one script for years, trying to make it perfect. And so I think for me, the biggest help with all these different competitions is a structure and a schedule.
Yeah, and I think, we all know how difficult screenwriting is to break into, and I think, unless you have a manager and agent, it's really hard to get your work read. I think, mostly in terms of agencies and studios and production companies, they're not going to read unsolicited work. So I think screenwriting competitions are like a nice loophole into the system. You can sort of get validated if you place. It sort of shows people, you cross a threshold that's like, oh, she's worthy of being read. So it's a nice sort of like, it recognizes you in the industry in that way.
What advice...
Oh, I was just going to say that third-party validation helps a lot. And to jump off what Dante was saying, it's really important to have a stable of content. Not like one great script. It's great to have a couple pieces of great content. And I think the deadlines it helps get you there. Yeah. It helps finish projects rather than just focusing on one forever.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. What advice do you guys have for writers who are, hoping to win a major competition or are considering applying for a competition or a fellowship program?
Write a lot. I think Little Miss Sunshine, this anecdote might be wrong, so forgive me if it is, but I think Little Miss Sunshine didn't even make the quarterfinals of the Nickel Fellowship. It was entered and didn't place. And it's not because it wasn't a great script. It's not because somebody didn't read it great. It's just because there is an element of subjectivity. And so no matter how good your project is, sometimes it won't win. It's important to have a lot of projects. It's important to be knocking on a lot of doors. Screenwriting contests, networking events, anything you can do to kind of get your work out there, get read, is important to be doing. But I think to win a screenwriting contest, you need to be writing a lot, and you need to be writing better and better scripts, because you'll notice, like I said, I think earlier, like you start and you're getting quarterfinaled in a lot of them, and then the more you write, you end up always being in the semis, then you end up finaling in a couple, and then it happens. So you can kind of track your progress. You do get better when you write more, just like anything else you practice.
And just like you were saying, like all these competitions and festivals are so different, and they all are programming different things. And and I know I have a lot of friends who they write something, they submit it, it doesn't get in, and then that's it. Like they put the project away and it's dead. Yeah. Right. And then I've Nancy Duff, who won the fellowship with me last year. She is relentless in the best way. She's so good, and she'll take scripts that have won and she'll continue to submit it, and then it keeps winning other things, and it's like that's exactly what you should be doing.
And she'll change a feature into a TV pilot and a pilot into a feature.
Yeah.
Great. All right. One more question while we still have Mark. So what advice do you have to our audience is mostly emerging screenwriters and filmmakers who are looking to get their scripts into the right hands. What are some things that you've done to kind of proactively pave the way for the luck that you need to get into the right rooms and meet the right people, and then get your script requested by people who can actually make something happen?
I think for me, I networked when I could and expanded my contacts when it was organic and natural to do, but it wasn't a focus for me. I wasn't querying producers. I wasn't like actively trying to set up meetings. My whole thing was, I'm going to spend 10,000 hours writing, and I'm going to be as good of a writer as I can be, so that when a door is open, I'm totally ready to walk through it. And so I think everyone's approach can be different, but for me, that's what really worked. So that when it was Fellowship Week, by that point, I had like a dozen spec scripts.
Wow.
Some I was really, the most recent 3 or so I was really proud of and like ready to go in with and ready to talk about. I had read every script on the blacklist for the past 3 or 4 years. Just so I was familiar with the types of scripts that were doing that. I was reading the trade, so I was familiar with the business side of things. Like, I was ready when those doors opened to like walk through. And I think that's important because, it's tough to get a door to open when you're trying to break in as a writer. And so when there is one that is open, you want to be ready to storm through, excited about your projects and ready to go.
How has having a manager helped you?
Having a manager has been amazing. He really helped me find my voice. My voice is very different now, I would say, and honed and specific compared to even when I won the fellowship a few years ago. I write mostly biopics and true story stuff now, which is what I really love to do. I love to do that research behind it, and I like to work on that stuff. So he's really helped find that. He helped me sign with an agent, with an agency. I signed it with UTA. He put me in contact with them and kind of started that conversation. He's really put together all the pieces of my career that I need to kind of take the next step.
So yeah, how about you guys? Is there anything that you have done that has been able to like kind of pave the way for some industry and career momentum?
Totally. I feel there are so many different ways into this business, especially if you're a writer. And a lot of people think, well, I'm a writer. That's it. That's it. I'm just going to wait for someone to knock on my door and offer me a writing job. It's not going to happen. When I first started out, I moved out to California. I lived in New York for a good 8 years, and I moved out late 20s. And I decided I'm just going to PA. I'm just going to learn every single aspect because, of the industry. Because if I'm a writer, I want to make sure my stuff gets produced. And how do you know if it's going to get produced? Well, you need to be on a production to see how things get produced. Mm-hmm. And so I was a PA with a lot of 21-year-olds, paying my dues. And I learned so much. I felt like a little spy sometimes. I was on the set of Glee and Video Village, and none of them knew I wanted to be a writer, and I didn't advertise it, which is, I think, a very important thing, too. You just want to be quiet.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane and learn and soak everything in. And but they didn't know I was a writer, and I learned so much, just hearing the director talk about why the scene wasn't working, or the writers huddling up, and then, them trying to fix it with the words or fix it with the camera angle. And I remember sitting there being like, oh, I don't want production to have to fix my writing with a camera angle. I need to make sure it's on the page. And so I feel like, be a PA, work in the office. You don't have to necessarily just work in the writer's room. You will get there. But work in the office, see what the line producer does, assist a showrunner, see what it's actually like to create a show from scratch.
How about reading screenplays?
Oh, and constantly, whenever I'm working on a project, I always read scripts that are kind of similar. And then I'm constantly, trying to see everything, and obviously there's so much content, so you have to pick and choose. But
Did you go to film school?
it's funny, I went to film school, but not for film. I went to Emerson, but that was
cool.
acting and directing.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But I've always been writing, and I want to direct my writing eventually. But it all starts on the page. I mean, you can't direct something unless it's written, So.
How about you, Anna? Is there anything that you've done to kind of proactively pave the way for your own career?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been an entertainment journalist for the past 6 years. So that's something I've done. That's the only job I've had to make money in the real world, let's say. And that's been immensely helpful just because it makes me stay in tune with everything going on in the entertainment industry every day, every second of every day. So, I know what scripts are selling. I know what projects people are looking for, maybe. So it sort of helps me decide which scripts to write. And I think also meeting a lot of filmmakers and actors has really helped sort of talking to them. I think directors and screenwriters especially, just sort of getting inside their mind for a moment has helped inform my own writing tremendously.
What about watching a lot of films?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the time. Part of my job, which is so cool, is that I get to screen movies constantly. And I think that has been hugely informative in terms of, noticing trends or noticing, what actors are looking for in terms of roles. I mean, the best thing you can do is write a script that actors are dying to get their hands on. And I think watching cinema constantly is a huge help in that regard.
What advice would you give to yourself 5 years ago, kind of knowing what you know now from your perspective?
So many things.
Calm down.
Yes, definitely.
It's not a race, and I feel like when you're here and you're, especially when you're overloaded with
Where's here?
the news in California and Los Angeles, and you're in, the hub of the entertainment industry in Hollywood, and you're plugged in, and, even driving to work, you're surrounded by billboards. It's so easy to get caught up with the product, with the end result. And I feel like, looking back, I'd be like, Dante, enjoy the write, enjoy developing, enjoy writing it, because once you do sell it, then there's 10 other people giving you notes, or a studio, and really take your time finding your voice. You don't, as I said before, you don't have to be good at everything. You don't have to write everything well. Like, I was working in sitcoms for a while, and that my voice isn't innately that type of world.
What were you
And
doing on the sitcoms?
I was a writer assistant on Odd Couple, and I worked on a couple other sitcoms at NBC. And so I was trying to write sitcoms, and that's just not my voice, and I wrote them. They were okay. They weren't great, and so it's coming to terms with, okay, what am I trying to say as a writer, as a human being, and it's okay that I'm not
Yeah.
good at
what are you
everything,
good at more naturally, and what are you not good at naturally?
I tend to lean toward more dark material, and it's just funny. The past couple of years, I've been working in comedy, So, but I learned so much from them and from those rooms. So, but I think
Comedians are dark.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I think, I guess, long story short, it's to calm down, to slow down, and to take your time finding your voice.
Yeah.
Because what's going to sell is a unique voice, and when people are clawing
Voice
to grab
is
your
so
script,
important.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's an intangible thing.
Yeah.
It really has to come from you.
Yeah, exactly.
And your perspective in life.
And life experience. You can't make I'm in it to win it, but it can't just be everything. You need to have a life. You need to see your friends. You need to go to museums. You need to go on vacation.
Yeah.
As a writer, it's your job to have an arsenal to pull
Absorb the
from.
world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
What
that's,
about you?
That's just a really good point that I want to hone in on, actually. I think, I'm someone who gets very sucked into writing and constantly writing and watching movies that I forget to have a life. And then it's like, what are you going to write about? So I think that's just a really good point. But yeah, I think, the advice I would have given myself is just realize that this is going to take a very long time. You will have a lot of rejections along the way. You might have people telling you this is not what you should be doing, and you have to want to do it. Your drive to do it has to outweigh those things, outweigh those negatives. And you also need to realize, I think, that it's quite possible you could never make money in this world, and you just really have to want to do it and try. And maybe also give yourself sort of tangible goals. I think we all starting out are like, I'm going to sell a script. Exactly. Like, I'm going to sell this first script that I just wrote, But it doesn't happen that way. Yeah. It's like, get a goal to have, X amount of people to read it and give you notes. Have a goal to get a manager in a certain amount of years, because these things take so much time.
So much time. Also, to take notes. Like, listen to people, because I have so many writer friends who they want notes. They don't want notes. They want me to tell them how amazing their script is, a first draft, and and so you need to take the notes. You need to, you're not the only one in a movie theater watching your movie.
Right. One thing that our audience asks often is like, how do you take notes, and how do you know what notes to listen to? A lot of people will get contest feedback or script coverage, and they'll get sometimes conflicting advice on their script. How do you guys deal with the kind of barrage of notes that comes to any writer, whether they're a successful professional or an emerging writer?
Yeah, I think any note that appears more than once is certainly something you really need to take a hard look at. And I think, the old sort of saying is find the note behind the note.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's like they might say, I hate this horse riding scene. And you're like, well, what do you hate about it? And sort of realizing what they're actually trying to say and finding a creative way into that in a way that makes you happy and hopefully will appease them as well.
And also do a thought experiment. Even if you don't agree with the note, no one has to see any of your revisions or drafts. So take the note, rewrite the scene. If it doesn't work, then okay, it doesn't work. No one has to see it. Burn it. But I think
Yeah,
at
don't be
least
too
just
precious.
try, but do a thought experiment. I was so against something recently in a script for months, and now we're probably going to do it. And it's like, oh, they were right, and I should have just tried. I should have just tried months ago.
And I think also realizing that people are hopefully going to pay to see or stream or whatever it is that you're creating. And so, taking studio notes, taking notes from directors, it's their project too. Yes, it's your baby, but it's also their baby. It's a huge collaboration, and it's not just your project. So you need to be willing to listen and accept other people's points of
Collaborate,
views.
exactly.
That's one thing that producers and executives are looking for is writers who they can tell are collaborative and receptive and a little bit flexible and not too precious about every word that they've written.
But I think what you said before is the note behind the note. I think that's so important because a lot of times they don't have the word. They're not writers. They're not necessarily creatives. So they see trends and they know what to buy, but a lot of times they don't have the words to explain what's wrong. So I think that's so smart. It's okay. They're bumping on this scene, but why are they really bumping on this scene? It's not the horse race. We all love the horse race. It's something that happens during it.
And when, on the flip side of that, when do you stick to your guns and say, no, like this is really important and here's why?
It's hard.
That's really
So hard.
That's really difficult. There's some darlings you don't want to kill, and you just have to have, I think, a reason. You have to have a good explanation as to why you don't want to kill them, and you have to be sort of willing to. I think if you're getting paid for something, you have to be willing to change things.
Yeah.
But I think there are certain things that if you think they are intrinsic to the overall arc or the storyline that is just, they cannot be touched, I think just going into it with an explanation and maybe an alternative approach is like a healthier way to do that.
How many years were you guys writing and working on scripts before you ended up getting career momentum?
I've been writing since I was a kid. And it started out mostly with being a kid from the 80s. Like we didn't, have, everybody has iPhones, everybody's a filmmaker now. So it started out with plays. I would write a lot of plays, and I would start adapting movies into plays. Cool. It was just a lot of Disney movies. I would just do stage productions of them. So I've always kind of been writing. So I think after college is when I actually started taking it a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, I've been writing journalistically constantly since high school, but I think in terms of screenplays, I've been writing in earnest for about 4 years, something like that.
I think I've had a kind of a theatrical career before this when I was in New York, and I think so. Film and TV, I've been writing probably in the past 6 years when I moved here. Up until then, it was a lot of musicals and stage shows.
How many scripts had you written before you won the ScreenCraft Fellowship?
Written and finished?
Yeah, fade out.
A handful.
Yeah, I would say about the same. And I think the script that I won with, I was still working on through Fellowship Week. I'm still sort of toying with it.
The one I won with last year, I'm now thinking of a whole little flip with, a little revamp with. Yeah, because I was developing it for a year with these two producers, and their notes were awesome, and I felt like everything was going really well. And then when it came time to get some meetings, I got some great feedback from all these networks, but no one would take a meeting because they all had to show similar or X, Y, and Z. And so now I'm kind of rethinking it to sell it, because it comes a point where, you can write all day, but the point is to eventually sell and make TV for millions.
Looking back on your, career trajectory so far, what are some of the milestones that you would point to as especially significant so far?
Yeah, so I just got an agent 2 days ago.
Congratulations.
So that was thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I just signed with WME. I wrote a script. My manager suggested I write a certain script, and I was first like, oh, I don't know, this is so different from what I've always written. I always sort of fancied myself a very dark and gritty, and it can only be on HBO or and then he suggested this script, which was a J.K. Rowling biopic, which is much more family friendly. And I was like, I don't know if I have it in me. But, you know, I love to do research as a journalist. I did a ton of research. I sort of did it. And it came out of me so naturally.
That's awesome.
And the response to it has been better than anything I've written in the past.
Really?
By like
great.
miles.
Yeah.
And so
Because of the subject matter, or do you think because
know.
you fit your unique voice so well?
I mean, I think, I mean, hopefully both. I don't know. But, you know, I got meetings with like every major agency because of that. And just, you know, I sort of got to choose, which I think is, people don't get to do that.
That's
often,
the dream. That's
I don't
amazing.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So that was, I think, the biggest milestone for me was just like, oh, like I signed with this agent and now the agent is, you know, we have huge producers who want to make it. We
That's so
have
awesome.
like actors who want to be in it. You know, it's just like,
The trajectory that I've seen for a lot of writers is like they write and they write and they write, then they'll get some recognition in a competition, which leads to signing with a manager often, and then the manager grooms them a little bit for a year, sometimes two, which leads them to getting an agent and a hot spec that's floating around town, which then gets them a writing assignment or staffed on a show. Looking back on your, you know, kind of career trajectory so far, what are some milestones that come to mind as significant for you?
I think, well, I actually won the short screenplay competition first year.
Which one?
The with Grief, my
Oh yeah,
my short film.
the
and-
ScreenCraft short
yeah,
screenplay
yeah,
competition.
yeah.
Right.
And what was that? 2015, maybe I think. And I'm making it now. I mean, I made it this summer, and so I
Congratulations.
think that's a milestone in a sense where I wrote it, and then because it won, I was like, oh, maybe I should make this, and it took a couple years. But my goal is to hopefully get it in some festivals to then get meetings with that route,
Yeah.
kind of go that.
What advice do
roundabout
you
way.
have to writers who are considering producing their own screenplays?
It's so important, I think, do it. It's so important. It was a life-changing experience this summer because I moved out here, like I mentioned, and I wanted to be plugged into the system. I wanted to see what it was like to work on big shows. And I did, and I worked in the office. Every different aspect, I was there and ended up in a writer's room. And to be honest, I was sitting there in this writer's room being like, oh, this is it? Like, okay, this is awesome, but like, I want to, I don't know, I want to make other things. I want to make bigger things. And so I think, making my movie this summer with a crew and raising that money and then seeing it come to life, I was able to do it because of the experience I had these past 5 years working on all these other shows. I think it's so valuable. It made me a better writer.
Did you direct as well?
I directed it, yeah.
Oh.
And that's my goal. But it made me a better writer, and because now I can't wait to do the next thing. Because now I'm like, okay, I learned this, and this. I would do this differently.
how
I would
did
do this
it, like,
the same.
change? I mean, I feel like when you actually tangibly make something, it probably changed the way that you write because you're like, oh, that isn't possible. What was I
It
thinking?
completely changed the way I write, and that's
Yeah.
I'm so it's like fed me now because now I'm so excited to do the next project, and I know obviously I'm not gonna be able to make everything I write, but I think if in this day and age everybody should. Even if it's a small short,
You
5
can.
minutes, just make something.
Everyone has a
And it
camera,
is-
even
yeah.
a phone,
And
you
it doesn't have
can
to
create
be
your
anything
content.
for other than yourself. And it doesn't even you don't even have to upload it to YouTube. You don't have to submit it to festivals. Like we're all just so used to just making things and having to share it immediately and make it for yourself, learn. I mean, I'm sure
Throw it away.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I'm sure you feel the same way. It's about the craft. I love writing, and I want to get better at it. And I don't want to just be a flash in the pan. And
Completely.
and so take time, like learn.
Yeah.
Watch everything, make everything.
One question that our audience often asks us is, do you have to move to LA to make it as a screenwriter? What are your perspectives on that question?
I think initially maybe not. I think while you're working on your craft, it's totally fine to be anywhere. I think taking meetings and meeting people and networking is crucial. So I think being in Los Angeles or New York, but especially LA, is like hugely important. I don't think I could have done this if I had stayed living in Oregon. Nobody would want to meet with me over the phone to talk about a script. I wouldn't have a manager. I wouldn't have an agent. I think being in LA is like pretty crucial when you reach a certain level.
When you're ready.
Yeah, when you're ready, totally.
Especially for TV.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the hub here, and the amount of people I've been meeting, and not to keep mentioning it, but even just being an office PA, my desk was across from the line producer who did Seinfeld, and it's just like, and you're working with these people every day, and just to be on a lot every day, even as an assistant, I will not forget it. Every time I went through those Paramount doors, I was just like, okay, remember this, because you may not get this all the time, you know? And
What are
just to be
some
around
of-
those people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's great advice, is like get an industry job or even an industry adjacent job. And when you're ready, when you've honed your craft and you feel like it's starting to gain some attention, then come on out to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
What was your fellowship week like? Like, what are some of the big takeaways that you feel like you got out of the ScreenCraft Screenwriting Fellowship experience?
Meeting so many people. It was really overwhelming, but it was so valuable. I mean, we had like a great breakfast with the screenwriters who wrote like Die Hard. And
That's
I was just like,
awesome.
what is happening?
See,
You know,
I
it
love
was
that.
so fun. And just like listening to people who are seasoned in this industry and who are so willing to help and give advice. You gave me an excellent piece of advice during our ScreenCraft meetings week, which was basically like every meeting you go into, try and come out of that meeting with a contact of someone else who might be interested in speaking with you
Yeah.
or reading your script. And I remember John told me this and I was like, but that seems so selfish. Like they're already doing so much for me. And he was like, no, people in this industry want to help one another. And I think that is so true.
Yeah. It's really important not to view the industry as like this giant gate that you have to break through. It's
Yeah.
really just a lot of people that are looking to help each other.
Yeah.
Because the more people you can help, the more people are going to help you. It's a really it's a system of favors and creative support and relationships. And that's one of the reasons that it's important to be out here when you're ready. I think don't come out until you are ready, because it can also swallow you a little bit
Yeah.
Yeah.
and be a little bit anxiety inducing.
Well, and it started to a little bit, to be honest, with me because I was, trying to plug into the system and write what I thought would sell and all these different things. And then it took this past year or two and me making my film to be like, oh, wait, no, I have a voice. It's specific. It's different. It may not be for everybody. But it's so easy to get lost, I think. Yeah.
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 What about your fellowship experience? Any big takeaways?
I have to say, I mentioned this before, but just the community of other writers, knowing Heidi and Nancy now, and it's so funny, Nancy and I, we've gotten coffee, and and Heidi and I actually went to the Story Labs together.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and months later, I was like, oh God, we were in the same group, and it was so awesome. And I think having that community, I spent so many years writing in this little room that I called my prison. I was on the first floor. It literally had bars on the windows, and so you completely forget that there are thousands of other people in Hollywood, and everywhere, doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so just now I can reach out to them and they'll read my script.
Yeah.
And
That's
get
a great
advice.
point. Do you want to talk a little bit more about sort of like peer writer support and how that's helped you in your craft?
Totally. I for a while was kind of against it. I was like, oh, writing, I'm just going to write my own stuff. And now it's just so invaluable, I think. Whether you have a writing group that you meet with monthly, sometimes that works for people, sometimes it doesn't. But just having people that I can go to with questions who truly understand, my parents, they're not going to get it. They love me. They're just not going to get it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't want, advice from a friend who doesn't watch the stuff I'm writing, So why am I going to take their advice, regarding a script when they don't watch comedy and I just wrote a comedy? So it's context and it's reaching out, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to do it
totally.
all on your own.
Completely. And I think also it's a skill that you have to sort of learn, in being willing to give your stuff to other people to read. I think, as writers, we are, in essence, sort of sensitive creatures, and it's difficult to get feedback. But I think if you have people that you trust, and also other writers who you can swap material with, that's really good, because then you're both giving each other honest feedback. And I think the same thing, I don't give my work to friends or my parents, because they'll be like, you're amazing.
Exactly,
Or,
and,
there's like some sort of like other motive.
It's appreciative, but
Yeah, it's nice. You do that when you want like
Yeah.
a compliment, but that's not going to get you anywhere.
exactly.
So I think also being willing to give your scripts to people who ask for them. Like if you meet someone at a party or something, and they're like, oh yeah, I work on the Paramount lot, like I'd love to read your stuff. Taking advantage of those opportunities and following up. I think there's a fine line between being annoying and saying, following up,
Yep.
but you sort of have to read that line. But I think, those relationships are crucial to getting anywhere. So really just follow up with people who offer to read your stuff.
When I was working at Paramount, we had there was a woman there who was doing publicity for the EPK packages for Glee, and 2 years later, she's working in development at NBC on the show I'm working on, and you just never know. You just never know. And there we were again, and you know, all the assistants, they're going to be showrunners and producers one day.
Yeah.
So you got to stick together.
Yeah. So you have both had some notable success winning some screenwriting competitions. How do you research and choose what competitions to enter?
I actually found like an article, I think it was maybe like IndieWire or something, and they were like, the 13 screenwriting competitions you have to enter, or that sort of like were the most bang for your buck or whatever. And they just included sort of all the big hitters. And so I was like, okay, if I have scripts that are ready, I will enter these things. You know, it gets expensive, so you sort of have to pick and choose. You know, I think there's certain ways in which you can get around that.
Which ones did you enter, and how did you choose the competitions that you wanted to enter?
For me, it obviously they get expensive, so you have to kind of pick and choose. But the ones I targeted first were the big ones and the ones that give feedback, because you know there's so many competitions now, and you can get lost in the sea of it. But if I'm going to spend that much money, I want to know what they think. I'd like feedback.
Was it valuable?
Very valuable. And you mentioned this before. Seeing if I got multiple notes, you know, like the same note, you know, from different competitions, you know, obviously that's something I have to work on, and that's something that you may not be able to see unless you know you collect all the data.
Yeah, and I think also looking for screenwriting competitions that are more than just like bragging rights. Like I think the ScreenCraft Fellowship I was so interested in entering because I was like, oh, if I win this, it will give me tangible sort of steps towards my goals. You know, I'll take meetings and I'll get to meet all these people and like sort of, you know, all of these things that felt much more real than just being like, oh, here's a laurel I can put on my screenplay.
And to piggyback that, like, and I've been able to, ScreenCraft has almost become a lifeline in a sense too, but truly, because some of these other ones you may be a finalist.
I'm not paying you to say
I know, but truly though, you become a semi-finalist or a finalist or something in a festival, and that's it. You never hear from them. You don't, you know. And with you guys, I've been able to reach out. I've been able to on multiple occasions.
That's been
an ongoing
for
relationship.
The fellowship is to create an ongoing kind of network and support system, not only between the fellows, but between the staff and all of the mentors that we assemble for the program.
Because you don't feel alone. You know, it's hard. You know, you're in this wherever you are, office or at home, and you have this script that you've worked so hard on, and you just feel so alone. So to feel like you have a community and other people to reach out to, it's important.
Well, looking ahead, I mean, you both have made some, big strides in, the early stages of your career. What are you looking forward most to in the next year?
Writing more and more and more. I think I'm looking forward to sort of having established my voice more. I feel like I feel more confident in the things that I know that I can write well. So I'm excited to sort of pursue those ideas more fully, I think.
Yeah, and I think, my goal is hopefully to get my film into a couple festivals, so when I'm there, I can talk about what I want to write next. And I think that's important. It's obviously you need to take care of your little babies, but you need to have an arsenal of other stuff. Yeah. So I can't wait to start diving into some of this other stuff and hopefully make it.
Do you have projects kind of in sequence that you want to attack?
Yes.
Yeah,
always, right?
Always.
Exactly.
It's good. I think that's really important as screenwriters. I mean, what managers and producers are looking for is writers who are just a fountain of creativity and ideas. And you should always have a list of projects that you want to get started on, as well as projects in process.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to catch up with you guys next year, maybe around this time. Talk about what you're doing, what festivals your film has been in, what new exciting biopics you're working on, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
And that's a wrap on our conversation with past ScreenCraft Screenwriting Fellowship winners. Subscribe below, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.